You wake up before sunrise, not because you chose up, because something moved in the dark. You don't know what it was. You never find out. You spend the next 40 minutes lying completely still, heart hammering, listening for a sound that doesn't come again, while 3 feet away your sleeping companions breathe slowly, unbothered, because they've lived this long enough to know what's worth fearing and what isn't. You haven't, for roughly 95% of human history, this was life, not a camping trip, not a weekend challenge, not a survivalist exercise. This was the entire structure of human existence. Every morning, every night, every season, for the 300,000 years before agriculture changed the terms. And if you were dropped into it today, not into a comfortable simulation, not with your phone, your water bottle, your hiking boots, your snacks, but truly dropped into the Pleistocene, the world your ancestors actually inhabited, you would not last a week. You might not last 3 days. That isn't an insult. It's a biological fact. And understanding exactly why reveals something extraordinary about what your body once was and what it has quietly become. Let's start with the thing that would kill you first: water. You know you need it? You've heard the rule: 3 days without water and you're dead. What you haven't had to learn is how to find it when there are no taps, no rivers in sight, no rain, and no map. Your ancient ancestors didn't carry a guide. They carried knowledge. Thousands of hours of accumulated observation about where animals go at dusk, which plants signal underground moisture, which rock formations collect dew before sunrise. Anthropologist James Sussman, who spent decades living alongside the Juhwansi Bushmen of the Kalahari, documented how members of that community could locate water in landscapes that looked, to outsiders, completely barren. They were reading the land. You are not. Without that knowledge, you'd spend your first day rationing whatever water you happened to have on you. By the second day, dehydration would begin to affect your thinking, your ability to reason, to plan, to remember. You'd make decisions that feel sensible and are catastrophically wrong. You'd rest in the shade when you should be moving toward lower ground. You'd follow the wrong tracks. By the third day, if you hadn't found water, the question of what killed you would already have its answer. But let's say you solve water. Let's say you're lucky. You find a spring, you find a river. Now you need food. Here's what you think you know about hunter-gatherers. They hunted big game, mammoths, bears, the dramatic stuff. Here's what the archaeological record actually shows. The majority of calories across nearly every studied hunter-gatherer group in the world came not from hunting but from gathering. Roots, tubers, berries, seeds, insects, larvae, calorie-dense, nutrient-rich, and almost entirely invisible to eyes that haven't been trained to spot them. You can't spot them. Anthropologist Richard Lee's 1964 field study of the Gongsun people of the Kalahari found that women provided roughly 60 to 80% of the group's total caloric intake through plant gathering alone, while men spent significantly more energy hunting with far lower success rates. You would have no idea which plants were edible, which were poisonous, which were edible only after specific preparation, and which ones killed you slowly over 3 days in a way that felt, at first, like nothing at all. Now what about the hunting? Could you at least contribute there? Picture it honestly. You don't have a gun. You don't have a bow, not a functional one. Not one you've spent a decade learning to use with precision. You have what your ancestors had: a spear, maybe a hand axe. The physical skills required to hunt large game with these tools are not intuitive. They are deeply, methodically trained, tracking, reading broken growth, identifying the subtle depression in soil that tells you A heavy animal passed here 3 hours ago, knowing the difference between a predator's trail and a prey's trail, knowing when to sprint and when to freeze. Anthropologists studying persistence hunting, the technique where ancient humans ran prey to exhaustion across open terrain, have documented the cognitive load involved. It's not just endurance. Evolutionary biologist Daniel Lieberman of Harvard, whose research on endurance physiology and human locomotion changed how scientists understand the body in motion, has pointed out that your body is structurally an extraordinary running machine. Long legs, short toes, an Achilles tendon that stores and releases elastic energy with every stride, a nuchal ligament in your neck that keeps your head stable while your body bounces. These are adaptations that appeared specifically to make you a distance runner. Your body still remembers how to run. What it doesn't remember is why, without the cultural training, the environmental familiarity, the 2 decades of childhood observation that told your ancestors which animal to follow and where it was likely to go, you'd run until you were exhausted and return with nothing. And now you've burned an enormous number of calories on top of the ones you were already missing. Let's talk about sleep, because you'd assume that at least you could manage. You can't. Not safely. Hunter-gatherer sleep. As researchers like Sussman and sleep scientist Jerome Siegel, who published a landmark 2015 study in Current Biology tracking the actual sleep patterns of 3 traditional societies, found to be quite different from what we assume. These groups did not sleep 8 continuous hours in the dark and wake refreshed. They slept in shorter consolidated windows, often sitting partially upright near a fire or in elevated shelters, alert to sound throughout the night, with brief wakings built naturally into their sleep cycles. Someone in the group was often awake or near awake at almost any given moment, not because they chose a watch schedule, because that distributed alertness was the adaptive strategy of a species that was prey as recently as it was predator. You would sleep the way you always sleep, deeply, in long stretches, assuming safety because your entire existence has been arranged to provide it. Out there, your sleep schedule is a liability. Polly Wiesner, an anthropologist who has spent decades studying the social and economic life of the Yuan-Shi, documented the extraordinary role that nighttime fire conversations played in the social cohesion and knowledge sharing that kept groups safe and fed. Knowledge was stored not in books but in people, and you'd arrive in this world carrying none of it. This brings us to the part that surprises people. Your ancient ancestors were not struggling. They were not living lives of misery and desperation, clawing at dirt and barely surviving until they could discover agriculture and escape. The evidence doesn't support that story at all. Marshall Salins, the economist anthropologist whose 1966 essay, The Original Affluent Society, became one of the most discussed papers in all of anthropology, argued, based on careful analysis of the ethnographic data, that hunter-gatherers worked significantly fewer hours per week than any subsequent society, including modern industrial ones. The Gongsan adults whom Richard Lee studied averaged roughly 17 to 19 hours of work per week to meet their food needs. The rest of the time was spent in rest, in conversation, in play, in the kind of sustained, unhurried social engagement that modern humans barely have the ability to imagine. The Blombos cave site in South Africa stays where ochre pigments engraved geometric patterns and shell beads have been found dating back 75,000 years, tells us that these were not people consumed entirely by the desperate business of staying alive. They had time and cognitive space for symbolic thought, for decoration, for meaning-making. The issue is not that your ancestors lived in misery. The issue is that they were magnificent at something you have spent your entire life systematically unlearning. They knew their world with a precision and intimacy that is almost impossible to describe to someone who has never had to know a place that way. Every plant, every animal, every terrain feature, every season shift. The knowledge that kept them alive was stored in their bodies, in their habits, in the unspoken protocols of their group, in the thousands of hours of observation and practice that began in childhood and never stopped. You're not stupid. You're not weak. Your brain is the same brain. Your body is the same body. But knowledge is not stored in the genes. It is stored in the culture. And theirs took hundreds of thousands of years to build. You'd arrive without it. 3 days, maybe 5, if you're lucky and it rains and you find something edible by accident, but not a week, not because you're incapable, because you're carrying the wrong kind of competence for the world you'd find yourself in. Here's the part that stays with you. You were built for that world. Every structure in your body, your endurance, your thermoregulation, your cognitive flexibility, your extraordinary social intelligence was shaped across hundreds of thousands of years of that world. And then, roughly 10,000 years ago, everything changed. Agriculture, then cities, then clocks, then offices, then screens. You kept the body, you lost the knowledge. And so, somewhere inside the person reading a screen at 11 at night, fighting a sleep schedule your ancestors would find baffling, eating things that come in packaging, quietly unable to name a single edible plant in your neighborhood. Somewhere in there is the same nervous system that once listened for something moving in the dark. You still wake up sometimes, heart hammering. You still never find out why